I Okay, great. Yeah, I actually don't know what questions people have about Guatemala. So during the showcase, it was clear that people either know where it is or know somebody who's from Guatemala or their family members from Guatemala, or they had no idea where Guatemala is. And then Cullen, if you have a question then about Guatemala specifically, let me know. One of the reasons we're going to be focusing on human rights about the country is because of the kind of violent history that the country has gone through. So, briefly, and I'm not going to dwell too much on the history because this is stuff that we would be talking about in the class, but it's a 60% majority indigenous community. 20 of them are Mayan. There's one non Mayan indigenous group. Then there's the Garifuna, which is Afro Caribbean. But based on this history right here from the 1960s to 1996, indigenous people were largely targeted. And so we start seeing the ways in which this history has impacted the present day. And the groups and organizations that we're going to be visiting are folks who are addressing this. They're saying, this is a problem, this is something that continues today, and we need to do something about it. And these are also organizations that tend to work with US based organizations. So we'll be also meeting some US based human rights groups to sort of see, well, how are US folks, Guatemala folks, sort of working together to address issues of inequity, whether it's indigenous, gender, climate. So I'll go through that. We're going to be visiting two cities, Guatemala City and Quetzaltenango, affectionately known as Shela, which is short for Xelajú. And Shela is just beautiful. And you all, it's my favorite city in the world. Not that I've been everywhere in the world, but it's surrounded by volcanoes and it's just absolutely beautiful. There's a lot of universities there. It's sort of artsy. There's tons of like art, coffee shop, but it's also one of the places that had in the 1980s, a large academic community that was targeted, including, and this is one of the reasons that this is close to me, my father's aunt who was murdered in 1980 for her political involvement pre 1980. And then at the height of 1980, apparently a lot of academics, scholars, professors, students were sort of coming together to address the military dictatorship that they were seeing that were impacting people. So these are the two cities that we're going to be visiting and sort of half time in Guatemala City and half time in Shela. One of our first stops is La Casa de la Memoria. And this link right here, and Jonathan, I can also forward you this because the links will take folks to the different information. La Casa de la Memoria will address all the disappeared, all the murder between 1960 and 1996. So this is the front of the museum itself, and you see all the faces. And this is an artist group that I hope that we actually get to meet as well. Hijos, who goes around and puts up these like wheat paste posters of people who are still missing and that there has been no justice for. And so we'll walk through La Casa de la Memoria to talk about historical memory, human rights atrocities during that time period, and how those human rights issues are also impacting today. So that'll be day two in the morning. In the afternoon, early afternoon, we're going to meet with UNAM, which is the oldest all female organization addressing issues of gender inequality in Guatemala. And they were established in 1976. So it'll be really cool to go see them, talk to them about their work from 1976 on. I mean, this is, in 1976, also among in the height of the violence, really addressing issues that women were going through. So that'll be interesting to sort of meet them, talk to them, see what kind of work they're doing, and how those of us who are not in Guatemala can sort of help outside of Guatemala. So we'll be visiting their office to meet them and talk to them. And then I know I'm going fast, so if you want me to slow down or if you have questions, let me know. Day three, we're going to La Puya. La Puya is a community that's fighting mining company in Guatemala, and they've been successful, but the fight still continues. So we're definitely going to go to their community, walk around. They'll feed us that day, and they'll talk to us about their resistance work, resisting. Like it says here, a human blockade preventing machinery and mining employees from entering the site to extract land that belongs to the people there. So we'll be able to talk about environmental justice, how Western companies are coming to sort of extract land, and how after NAFTA and then policies today are sort of pushing for Western companies to sort of um, take land from the people. So La Puya becomes really, really important. And I'm really excited to be going to visit them in their community so that they can walk us around the community and talk to us about their actions of resistance. This is Shela. And again, there's a lot of pictures of Shela here because I am personally attached to Shela. But here's a cathedral. This is a Mayan ceremony that I was invited to go to in 2014, which is just outside of Shela, but still in the state of Quetzaltenango. And we'll see if we can sort of see a Mayan ceremony when we meet the different indigenous groups that we're going to meet. These are the volcanoes. The volcanoes are active, and in Shela, we're surrounded by volcanoes, so we'll be able to see that. And you all will have at least a day and a half to explore and take some hikes if you wanted to. Um, just a bus. There's tons of buses like this. As Westerners, we call them chicken buses, but the locals just call them buses, right? And as you all know, the reason they're called chicken buses is because people will take their produce, their chickens, on the bus. These are sort of the streets in Shela. Again, you can sort of see the volcanoes. This is one of the oldest of bridges in Shela, and there's two of these that we'll see as we walk around. This is Guatemala City. This is the sort of, I suppose, the White House of Guatemala City, and we'll spend some time in the central area, where sure there's shopping, but there's things to see. One of the things that would be interesting for us is that at least 2 years ago, there were a lot of Haitian and Venezuelans taking over the central part of Guatemala City because they're sort of stuck in Guatemala and there's nowhere to go. So hopefully we'll meet some migrants in Guatemala. This is in Shela. So in the Central Park in Shela, there's tons of activities. It's a very cultural place. So we'll be able to see the different things that happen during that time period when we go. And in December, getting close to Christmas, there's a lot of activities going on in the Central. Um, this is dusk in Shela. So again, I just want to pitch it as a beautiful place. If you don't go in the study abroad, go to Shela. You won't you'll love it. This park is dedicated to a poet who wrote one of the most famous Guatemalan songs, Luna de Xelajú. And this little park is dedicated to him. All right. So day 4, like I was saying, is a day that we are planning to go to a migrant shelter in Shela to sort of meet Central and South Americans who are sort of stuck in Guatemala or are there sort of as their pit stop on their way north. And I'm looking forward to that day because that's, we'll be addressing how the history and the current conditions are sort of pushing migrants to find their way north. But then most of what we talk about in the U.S. is that Mexico-U.S. border. There are all sorts of borders that South Americans specifically have to have to cross in order to come north. And this migrant shelter sort of feeds, helps, gives medical aid to migrants who are on their way north. Day 5, we'll be meeting Maya Quiche in a community 48 cantones. And this is a completely autonomous community-based governance in Totonicapan, which is not far from Shela. And so we'll be meeting this indigenous group and talking to them about what it means to be autonomous, what it means to be self-governed in Guatemala itself. So that will be day 5. Day 6, we'll be meeting Grupo Cajolan. Cajola is a town not far from Shela. It's a Mam community. A Mam is a Mayan group, but in 2015, that 60% of their population was North. And as they've been sort of deported back or have gone back home on their own, they're sort of thinking about how do we help our community so we don't have to migrate, so that we can stay home, so we can sort of have an economic life of our own. And so we'll meet this group and looking at the ways in which they have created a school, textile industry, and really address the financial need of their community in order for them to sort of be able to live, like it says here, a dignified life without having to migrate north. And this is a Mam population. This group is also one of the groups who has been slowly publishing children Mam books. So they become really important in terms of addressing linguistic identity and linguistic rights in the country. Day 7 and day 8, you all will have a free day. Day 7 in Shela and day 8 in Guatemala City, and we can talk about places to go in Shela and Guatemala City as we approach. Day 9, we'll be meeting with Nizwa, and Nizwa is one of the sort of transnational organizations that have ties to the US and to Guatemala to address issues of human rights. So they do a lot of human rights accompaniment, and then they have strategic political campaigns, not only digital but on the ground. And so we'll meet and talk to them, and that'll be the last thing that we do. And one of the reasons is because they do have a U.S. home base. And so for those of you who are interested in working for a nonprofit, a global or international nonprofit, this is a good place to start and good folks to meet. And that'll be our day. And then day 10, we leave. And I know I rushed through that. So yeah, Cullen, if you have any questions, or Jonathan, if you have any questions, you all can just, ask, unmute, or use the chat. Yeah, we arrive we would arrive December 1st. And so that first day is just for us to get to know not get to know one another. We would know each other by then, but sort of get to know where we're staying. And we'll talk about, sort of rules, things to think about while we're in Guatemala City. And as we travel to Shela, that's where we'll get sort of our rules of conduct, things to do, not to do. Don't take pictures of people unless they're okay with it. Um, and and we'll have a dinner, I think, hopefully planned for that day, but it's something together anyway. And then day 2 is when we just start traveling Guatemala City, for that one day before we leave to Shela the next day. So that's the plan right now. Do you have any questions about the course itself in the autumn, or are you pretty much okay? And have I met you before, Cullen?
No, I don't think we've met. Sorry if I'm in a sort of a loud environment.
Oh, you're good.
Would the course be more focusing on like the current like efforts of human rights organizations in Guatemala, or would it be more of like focusing on like a historical perspective up until now?
Both. So thank you for asking that. So both. We are going to be working with or partnering for the class with a human rights organization established here in Chicago, and it's one of the oldest human rights groups established in 1980. They were part of the original sanctuary movement in the U.S. Highly involved in that. So we're definitely going to be starting with the history and sort of thinking about how history has impacted the present, because out of that history is where we start seeing sort of neoliberal practices. We start seeing um, the movement for language rights and indigenous rights, And so we'll start seeing how the history is impacting the present. So we're going to be moving back and forth because all these organizations that we're going to be meeting, with the exception of the migrant shelter, have grown out of that time period. Um, so it's a back and forth, but we're definitely going to start with the 1960 to 1996, and sort of seeing, well, what happened during that time period, acts of genocide, acts of human rights violations. Like the stuff that we're going to be reading will be, and I'm sure you're probably familiar, sort of dire, and then we're going to move to the present, but it's going to be a sort of ping pong effect. It's going to be a back and forth. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and then one more thing I'll mention is, so for the application, the study abroad application, so May 1 is the deadline for that, and that's coming up pretty fast. So I would suggest, you want to make sure that your application is completed and submitted by May 1. So by doing that, you'll ensure that you're considered for any study abroad scholarships. So study abroad scholarships, there's nothing extra that you have to do. You're automatically considered as long as your application is complete by the 1st. And with the Identities Abroad programs, you do get an automatic $1,000 scholarship, which is their minimum. And then on top of that, you are considered for any additional scholarships based on your financial need and, your GPA and other factors. So it's really important that you get that application completed by then if you're interested. You're not on the hook for anything. So even if, there's no application fees or anything like that. So just by submitting an application doesn't mean you're committed to the program in any way. It's just to ensure that you're in the system, that you're evaluated for scholarships, and that you're all set in that first set of students. If you have any questions about the application or about the process or anything like that, feel free to reach out to me. So I'm Jonathan Montgomery. I'll be your contact in the study abroad office. So feel free, my email, I'll put it in the chat. My email is also going to be on the program page itself. Towards the bottom there is the program contact. If you have any questions for that, for anything involved with the application or anything like that, just feel free to let me know. And thanks so much for stopping by, and popping into the session. We really enjoyed, having you here. It's great.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks to both of you for the presentation. It was great.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, reach out. I just realized I didn't introduce myself, but I am in Writing, Rhetoric, and Discourse, so you can find my office there if you have any questions.
Okay, great.
Great.
Thanks, Colin. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.